Hi, and welcome to another Chameleon Chat. Today, I am fortunate to have Moses Farrow with me. Moses and I met last September at the Concerned United Birth Parents Summit in Kansas City. I had the opportunity to speak to him in person after following him for years, which was a great thing for me. And now he's here today. Hey, Moses, would you tell everybody just a little bit about yourself? And then we're just going to start talking.
Okay. First of all, thank you for having me on here. I am a trauma therapist, and I came into the adoption community, as we call it, over a decade ago at this point. And I have been on this journey. Um, Discovering and revealing and now exposing the truth about what has happened to all of us. The way that I put it at this point is that the human trafficking industry is running a child supply market on a global scale and uses adoption as its propaganda that has allowed it to be in operation for over 400 years at this point. So, my work that I am doing these days, again, because, you know, we're all on this journey of discovery, of, shall we say, coming out of the fog. And at this point for myself, it's been being on the path of pursuing the truth, being in pursuit of the truth. So, what I know now, with the knowledge and wisdom I've gained from a handful of others in this community, I'm now out there helping to uh, um, the way that I put it is deprogram people from the propaganda and the brainwashing, the culture of coercion that really has encompassed the entire world. Uh, so the human trafficking industry has really pulled one over on all of us. And I'm very thankful that I'm not the only one, that I am joined by others. And I'd like to include you on this movement of exposing the truth about what is really going on here.
I am doing my best to spread truth where I can, yes.
Very good, very good. So a bit more about myself. The way that I put it these days, I was taken from my homeland of South Korea. I was roughly 2 years old at the time. I was given my adoption story, which was that I was found in a phone booth in Seoul and handed over to the orphanage there. And then I grew up in New York City in a very large family with 10 others who had been taken from their countries of birth and places in the US as well, domestically. Um, I identify myself as a survivor of child abuse. Um, I used to refer to it as adoption trauma, but we can get into this a bit
Right, the
because
language.
I really don't apply the adoption narrative anymore because it's, again, part of the propaganda. Uh, I also identify as a suicide and suicide loss survivor.
Mhm.
And this is a huge part of um, the motivation behind what I do now.
And I do want to talk more about this too.
Well, I hope we do get to it.
Yes.
Um, So, yeah, I had grown up with uh, three of uh, others, um, Tam, Lark, and Thaddeus, who I grew up with and considered part of the family and therefore my siblings. And in 2000, Tam had overdosed on her medication. In 2008, uh, Lark died from an age-related lung infection, and she had chosen not to be resuscitated. And Thaddeus in 2016 uh, just outright shot himself. Um, so he died from a lethal gunshot wound. Um, so it's been important to keep their memories alive. I pay tribute to them every year.
Yes.
And each year, I reveal a bit more of my own thoughts, my own journey of exploring more about their lives, their backgrounds, and putting it all together, really. So, uh,
It's
yeah,
beautiful how you honor them every year. It really is. And keeping
thank
their
you.
story alive. So thank you for that. And
Yes.
we were, you were talking about the suicide with adoptees, and the new study, I'm sure you've seen it, says 36.7% more likely to attempt suicide than people that aren't adopted.
Yes. So this is something that I have uh, um, spoken up about over the years
Mhm.
and brought up with the previous study from 2013 that indicated the rate was 4 times more
Correct.
likely to attempt and die by suicide. Yes, I am aware that there is this new uh, uh, study that's in its very preliminary stage,
Right.
and it's concerning to me the way that it has been um, uh, publicized, uh, put out there at this point. Um, of course, those of us who have direct personal experience with suicide are very eager to have updated numbers and
Mhm.
statistics and data, especially when it's self-reported. Um, uh, so, my concern, however, is it hasn't reached the point of being officially published. So I want to be careful and
Mhm.
mindful about um, uh, setting it up as fact um, before it is established as that.
Yeah.
Uh,
The
but
word preliminary is really important when sharing that.
so yes, I do see the need for updated statistics. I myself have had a very strong interest in reaching out to the American Foundation uh, for Suicide Prevention.
Hmm.
Uh, they conduct annual studies
Okay.
um, uh, on um, on Americans, uh, and so each year they conduct their own study and publish it uh, m- mostly is not the right word. But indicating generally that anywhere from 1.8 to 1.9 uh, attempts are made. I believe it's 1.8. Um, Americans make an attempt each year.
Mm.
Uh, and the number has um, revolved around, um, uh, it's such a challenge when your words don't come to you.
Yeah.
It's the thing of growing up, I guess. But yeah, the the numbers are roughly 45, 48,000 Americans who die by suicide every year.
Mm. Wow.
I don't like to generalize those numbers. I want to make sure every human life is counted.
Yes.
So I don't like rounding, but just off the top of my head,
Sure.
just to put that out there. So uh, I would very much like to see uh, the organization pick pick up the need for statistics for our population. And that's really where I'm going to keep putting it. We are a population.
Yes, you're
There,
right.
there's roughly anywhere from 7 to 9 million of us here in the U.S. alone.
Right.
Uh, and I'm not sure if we do have an actual number worldwide, globally, uh, in part
Unregulated.
in part because um, no one's really keeping track of.
Right.
Uh, so,
Hence why your description of human trafficking, right? Is that my understanding is because of that, one of the reasons?
um, I'm not seeing the connection you're making.
Well, the industry is unregulated. So when human life, taken and exchanged and it's unregulated, and as you were pointing out earlier, human trafficking is the language that you use instead of adoption. So I was wanting to talk about why you no longer use the word adoption and you use human trafficking.
Mm, okay. Okay. So, and this is really a good place to start
Okay.
in terms of use of language, because we have been socialized really for generations at this point to see it as adoption. And it's reinforced by the fact there are policies and laws that have legalized the term adoption and make it more real for all of us. Those of us who have lived experience um, have now grown up with any other reference point other than calling ourselves adopted and adoptees. And I certainly have gone through that in my journey. And at this point, over the last few years, I have challenged this and challenged
Mhm.
myself to find other identifiers, other ways to identify myself.
Yep, I've noticed that.
And I appreciate that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, in terms of use of language, this is incredibly important
Mhm.
uh, to be oriented to what has happened to us. And uh, with other forms of trauma, typically traumatic events, this is a key point in one's recovery is to say, this is what's happened to you. Uh,
Right.
you were in a car accident. Uh, you got a concussion from falling down. Um, right? So, in the medical field, doctors, nurses, medical professionals are trained to use very precise language
Mm.
and to make it clear, here is what's happened to you. Uh, for the purpose of here's how we go about your recovery. Uh, so a concussion from falling off a ladder is very different than a brain injury from a car accident, um, right? So it's important to have the right language for ourselves.
Sure.
Now, the second layer to this, what I refer to as the culture of coercion,
Mm-hmm.
is there is another purpose to this propaganda, right? To keep us, um, and I really don't like making this reference, so I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop myself, but um, to keep us in the fog, right?
Mm-hmm.
To keep us from the truth is really
Mm-hmm.
where I've landed it for myself. So to keep us from the truth of what's happened to us. Now, it's important to ask why. Why are we being prevented from knowing the truth?
Mm-hmm.
That this is deliberate. So with that, we need to unpack that layer
Mm-hmm.
to, okay, we're all out here uh, discovering our truths for for ourselves. Uh, and, and and this is a point that I've brought up more recently. We're all interested, but it's more than interest. We're all oriented to uh, um, finding and speaking our own truths. So when we're confronted in public spaces, our fallback position eventually becomes, well, I'm only speaking from my own experience. This is true because I lived it, which prevents us from saying, actually, I know 1,000 others who have had the same or similar experiences. This is not just my truth, but more of an objective truth. And this is a key thing because then that is what gets us to unify in a single message, in a single truth, in a in an objective truth, as opposed to keeping us divided and therefore isolated from each other. So it's important to unpack these other layers of why we're not being told, here's what's happened to you, which is you've been taken and you've been trafficked. So we have been calling ourselves stolen
Mm-hmm.
and abducted,
Mm-hmm.
kidnapped.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it is becoming more familiar to us to say that we're trafficked.
Right.
And in this way, uh, we are uh, re uh, reprogramming ourselves, maybe deprogramming ourselves
Right.
to see ourselves as victims of crimes. So
And I'm sorry,
please,
I wanted to
yes,
add
please.
you're right because I'm just going to speak for the baby scoop era because I'm a baby scoop era and this is kind of my area of expertise. Like you have a different area of expertise in this. And that's why these conversations are so important. The baby scoop era, like you said, was a crime. It was a crime against humanity. And other countries have acknowledged that it was a crime. So the mothers and the children in those countries did have a crime happen to them. And therefore, the language should be changed, correct? Because that's what you're coming at, is that was an actual crime. It's been now acknowledged as a crime, so the language should change. And of course, the baby scoop era here in the United States, they're trying to do it again. We'll maybe get to that conversation, but they haven't acknowledged it here. And maybe that's the barrier of us not being able to say trafficked, because of it will, number one, won't be recognized in the United States as trafficked, and the reluctance to use that because maybe people won't be able to hear it if we're trying to change the narrative. But that's why I want to have this conversation, is how can we get through the language barrier when in fact crimes have been committed and acknowledged.
Hmm. Okay. Uh, let me backtrack a little bit,
Okay. Yes.
um, and go through some of your key points that you've just brought up. So to backtrack about my own experience professionally. So I came into this work back in 2008, and I led a program for family preservation for a couple of years. And then I was hired by an adoption agency to run post-adoption services. I did that for about 4 years. I've been in private practice ever since, primarily focused on our population. Uh, so, uh, yeah. Uh, so personally, I understand that I'm part of this international adoption uh, community population. Um, and then professionally, I've been able to gather a wealth of experience domestically through the adoption agency, post-adoption support services, um, and then certainly with um, so many other professionals, experts uh, who have lent their voices and knowledge about what they think is going on over the last 10 years. So in the last uh, uh, 4 or 5 years is when I've uh, really sat down and thought through all of this and started um, coming to my own conclusions, and one of those conclusions was I really got to get to the bottom of this. I've got to uh, find out the truth in all of this. Okay, so you brought up several key points. Um, so yeah, I wanted to lay that out. I guess as part of my introduction. Uh,
Thank you.
so 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 that yeah, people understand. I'm not just coming from my own personal experience. I've been a therapist for over 20 years. Been professionally involved in this work of adoption for the last 10, over 10 at this point, and am certainly on my own journey, that's what I like to call it,
Mhm.
to get to this point of, okay, I have come across numerous truths, and I'm now using my voice to speak from a very well-rounded perspective, uh, which certainly speaks to I am a big picture thinker. Like I like
Correct.
pulling back the lens, so to speak, and looking at the whole picture. getting everything together, um, pulling all the pieces together. So, okay, uh, with one point that you brought up, um, and this is a key point about uh, the challenges that we have here in the US versus other countries. Other countries, for example, are conducting investigations into falsifying documents.
Yep.
Whereas here in the US, we call it what? What do we call
Open
it?
adoption. What?
Open. Yeah, yes, yes, yes. Keep going. Keep going.
There's,
Open
saving a
adoption.
child. There's all sorts of things, you were chosen, there's all sorts of words that they like to throw at us.
So in other countries, they are exposing, revealing, and demanding redress from from these crimes.
Right.
Now, now, in all honesty, are they really identifying these as crimes or just abuses and corruption
Right.
in in their programs and
Right.
systems?
In the
But
legality aspect of it. Right.
but they are shutting down those programs.
Right.
So here in the U.S., so one example is we call it reform,
Mhm.
and we're after several key reform measures in citizenship on the international
Mhm.
side, on original birth certificates on the
Yep.
domestic side,
Yep.
um, and uh, other rights in terms of reproductive rights and um, health rights,
Right.
uh, um, identity rights. So much of it points to the need for reform, as opposed to
It does.
investigations of crimes that result in shutting down programs and systems. So our approach, which has taken decades, I mean lifetimes,
Mhm. Mhm.
where um, in other parts of the world, primarily Europe, um, uh, in the last, I don't know, handful of years, maybe the last decade, we've seen half a dozen countries conduct investigations that end in the shutdown of their adoption programs.
That's right. South Korea was the last, right?
Well,
Just
South,
recently.
South Korea is underway,
And yes,
conducting
investigating.
their investigation of falsified documents, of fraud, of
Mhm.
exporting Korean babies, right?
Right.
Um,
Right.
so this is where, yeah, language is really key.
Right.
So, um, so this is a point of concern for me, is that the approach of taking a reform approach has taken uh, um, advocates decades and lifetimes, to shift the legislation, the policies in maybe a third of the states.
I'm actually
You
looking
know,
at the adoptees rights law.com because I always get the numbers mixed up. 15 states are unrestricted, 19 compromise, and 17 are restricted. Adopteesrightslaw.com.
yeah. So so this is something that I came into when I lived in Connecticut, and I was briefly part of the movement there to gain access to original birth certificates there. Connecticut has um, uh, won their case. So
Thank you.
they're one of the 15 at
Right.
this point. Um, but since then, I have put it out there. Where are the the lawsuits against these states? Where is the accountability really?
Right.
Because taking a reform approach means we understand the laws and policies that were put in place, and we really just want our rights back.
Right.
Um, we're not really wanting to hold anyone accountable. In fact, we want to we want to appeal to the legislators. We want to appeal to these policymakers
Mhm.
to um, take corrective action.
Right.
So we don't necessarily want to go after them and say, well, you set this up in the first place, and
Right.
look at all these families and lives that have been lost and destroyed, uh, which is the case.
Mhm.
But it takes shall we say, a more uh, uh, friendly approach, just a more a cooperative approach of
Of course.
saying, well, we do recognize the destruction uh, these policies um, um, have made on these families and these lives, but really we're just wanting access. We have a
Right.
right to our identifying information and medical histories and so on and so forth, as certainly as well as the opportunity to reunify with our families.
Absolutely.
And so, uh, so for me, I'm now taking the approach, right? I'm now putting the word out that there needs to be accountability,
Mhm.
and that these are crimes. And I have been challenged and confronted by other advocates saying, "Shh, that no, no, this is a futile endeavor that uh, we need to keep calling it adoption because that's what the laws are written around, um, and that's how we've all identified, and centered all of our narratives around. So,
Right. And this is where the word adoption, in my opinion, should be split apart in different and mean different things like what you're saying. Because when I say adoption, I get attacked by people that have taken in foster children or people whose parents did, you know, there is no reunification, there is no kinship possibility. And I hear these stories and I'm like, okay, I do know that there are, that does happen too. So those children, shouldn't be denied a family. I still don't think adoption, the exchanging of names and like we said, the restricting of rights is necessary. But, they'll say, well, guardianship wasn't an option in my state, things like this, and they'll push back. And it's like, okay, okay. So that's a different type of adoption, if we have to use that word, than what happened to me and you. You see what I'm saying? It's completely different. So when we're out there talking to people in society and we get pushback a lot, I can understand why they're pushing back. At
oh,
least to
absolutely.
some extent, not being
Well,
rude and
well,
completely unempathetic. I mean, that's not right.
absolutely.
So,
Th so this speaks to the culture of coercion that the
right,
industry has set up, and the generations long, I mean, really hundreds of years long, propaganda machine to
right,
brainwash everyone into saying, well, adoption is in the best interest of the child,
Hmm.
Adoption is about giving them a better life.
Right.
Adoption is about saving children. It is about giving up children for adoption. So these statements have traveled for generations. And so there are 2 points that you're bringing up I'd like to highlight. Along this line, women at this point are being born into this culture of coercion. So from a very early age, and I say really from the time they're born, the socialization is already there because the messages are already out there in the public, have already been heard by our parents and grandparents and um, people, everywhere have heard these messages, whether it's in TV or movies or books or just uh, uh, from conversations. I mean, within families, their congregations, the messages are out there. They've
Yes,
canvassed
they are.
really, they've canvassed the entire world really. So
Did you
what?
hear that Arkansas is now requiring adoption as part of their curriculum, teaching children that adoption is a good thing, and it's funded by Gladney? It's shocker and surprise. I knew you'd be surprised about that, right?
I did come across that headline. That was in place of a different curriculum, I believe. So something that they used to teach is now being replaced with classes about adoption. Um, so uh, to solidify this point, that uh, we do need to focus a whole lot more on our youth and primarily girls, uh, who have continued to be targeted by this lifelong recruitment tactic. Uh, and the word is getting out there now that these young girls are being groomed from an early age to uh, believe adoption is an option.
Right.
And to your latest point, it's not being taught to them. It's being reinforced directly. And to your point about naming Gladney as one of the largest and leading adoption agencies in the U.S. at this point, uh, shall we name a few others?
Yeah, go
Uh,
ahead.
Bethany Christian Services,
Bethany. Mm-hmm.
Holt International,
Old International.
which is part of this investigation in South Korea,
Yes, they are.
um, as well as Catholic Charities. So
Mm-hmm.
you wanted to present a book, which we'll get to,
Yes,
but
we're going to get to that.
just as an introduction, that uh, the church and religious groups, uh, the evangelicals. Now I'm getting bolder at
Hmm.
uh, putting this out there as part of the truth about the church's involvement with this propaganda machine
Yep.
and this message about saviorism and
Hmm.
gratitude.
Hmm.
So, uh, which, by the way, I do want to say, like, much of this I don't bring up with the work I'm doing now. Um, but in terms of um, uh, getting on the same page with where everyone else is at, anyone who might watch this or hear this, want to make sure that we lay a wide foundation to uh, these issues. So I want to make that uh, make that point here.
Okay.
But saviorism and gratitude. is a way of normalizing and socializing the idea of taking and trafficking children, um, which goes back to your other point that I've brought up numerous times. Um, uh, Trafficking children is not a solution to child protection,
Hmm.
family planning. Uh, so the, uh, the way we reframe this in people's minds
Hmm.
when we go into these public spaces and are confronted or encounter others with their pre-programmed thoughts and attitudes about adoption, uh, we need our fallback isn't should not be, well, I'm just speaking from my own experience and I'm using the language that makes sense to just me. That really, we need to form a globalized, a universal glossary of terms and
Okay.
phrases and comebacks and responses to the uh, oppression of this culture of coercion and its propaganda. So it's
Yes.
important. It's important to have such statements as child trafficking is not a child welfare solution. Just
Right.
um, and leave it at that. There's
Right.
no further explanation. There's no further need for evidence or anything because speaking to those of us with lived experience, uh, as we witnessed during the upsurge of the Black Lives Matter uh, after George Floyd and uh, several years ago, we're not here to educate. We're here to tell you that this is what's happening to us.
Right.
And so
And
this is where it's important uh, to listen to us
right.
and not uh, um, have us continue in this emotional labor of, well, help me understand more, help me,
Right.
uh, help me understand more, educate me about what is happening to you. Um,
And when
yeah.
we do, they push
Well,
back because the
well,
narrative has been sold to them for so
well,
long that they
well,
can't hear us.
the point being, I mean, that is a good point, but the point being, it's not our responsibility to
Right.
educate them.
You're right.
It's our, it's here we are. We're existing.
We live.
Uh, we're here, and we're saying there's a big problem with our with society. There's a big problem that we're facing as a population, as a minority group, as shall I say, minoritized, victimized, marginalized minority group. So, uh, in the same light as Black Lives Matter, it's not our responsibility to educate the public.
and
It's
and
it's enough for us to be here and speak up about here's what's happening to us and who's going to step up and do something about it.
it's victimization of a child. And then when we're an adult, they separate the two, is what I'm trying to come to. It's like they see the child as something that we aren't a part of anymore. Or they infantilize us and just only see us as a child. And it depends on where the situation and the language. So it benefits them when they save the child. But then on the other hand, when we're an adult and we talk about it, they tell us that we need therapy. And then we're like going, well, yeah, we were traumatized. So yeah, we need therapy. But most of us that are talking out now, we have had therapy, and that's why we can talk about it, which is what they don't see. And it's, but they're not allowing us to say the truth because the child, does that make sense? The child is over here is the one that, they got to do what they wanted, which is usually they want a baby. And that's the adoption that I'm talking about is plenary infant adoption, where you're taking a baby and just handing them off to strangers, which is, what happened to you too. We were taken from our family because of shame, guilt, like you were talking about. The church has a lot to do with that. When I was born, women were shamed if they were unwed. My mother was in college. My father was in college. They had sex, shame on them. And they were 20 and 21. In the 60s, they could have easily had a family, but he was shipped off to a war he didn't want to be in. And then she found out she was pregnant. So, shame, she couldn't have a baby, even though they were better suited to be parents than my adoptive parents. But my adoptive parents were married, so they were seen as better people. And I don't want to bash my adoptive parents here because they were decent people. They were traumatized and didn't get help for their trauma. They got a baby. And then they thought everything was fine because they fit into that normal society, which is where we were talking about language, the married couple. And in America, let's face it, most times it is a white, Christian, straight couple that these people are seeing these children adopted to, correct? And then this is where everything seems to fall apart because the child is then put into a family that they're not related to in any way, shape, or form. And we're not seen for who we authentically are, whether our skin color matches theirs or not. The international and transracial have a whole cultural level to go through that we don't, but we're not seen as ourself. And that's what I'm trying to get to is all of us as adoptees, we're not seen as ourselves. We're seen as the adopted children of. Did that make any sense?
Absolutely. I mean, you've laid out uh, much of the narrative that is out there.
Right.
So thank you for doing that. And what I'd like to do is unpack some of the key points. eh, Starting with this last point about keep referring to it as adoptees and not knowing ourselves. So by continuing to call ourselves adoptees, are we really allowing ourselves to know what has happened to us, to know who we are? If adoption is the propaganda, what I've referred to in one of my latest articles, the illusion of adoption is over. So let me put it to you this way, with one of your points that you brought up. Are we or are we not commodities? So by calling ourselves adoptees, are we calling ourselves commodities? When there are a number of us who call ourselves adoptees and say, no, we're human beings and our human rights have been violated. So this is a callback to a universal glossary, a universal language of terms. If we're going to continue the illusion of adoption, if we're going to continue using the industry's propaganda as a way of using it against itself, uh, which is it? Are we or are we not commodities? Is adoptee a definition of a person who's been commodified, or is adoptee a definition of a person who feels their rights have been violated, because those are two very different experiences.
Right. And there's different types of adoptees, like I pointed out, from different systems.
So I bring this up knowing that you yourself have built your platform on the adopted chameleon.
Hmm.
And as we started off about the use of language, and for both of us so far in this conversation have used the adoption language in terms,
Hmm.
the industry's terms. Um, but this is a bit of a challenge now.
Right.
Are you and I in this conversation willing to stop using the industry's terms? And what I have started to do is at least reframe it,
Hmm.
redefine it. So when I say adoption, I have publicly stated this is human trafficking, this is child trafficking.
Hmm.
So that's the definition I'm using, and I wrote another article that broke down the very definition, the dictionary's definition of adoption,
Yep.
which states, and I'm going to sum it up, but
Hmm.
essentially is taking someone else's child to own them.
Hmm. Right.
And somehow somehow uh, we know how, but
We know.
the propaganda has been so effective, so successful,
Right.
that this could be written into the very definition of the word and still be misunderstood, misconstrued, misidentified, misdefined by the very people who have experienced being taken and owned by someone else.
Right. And this is a great segue because Moses on his Facebook page yesterday, on it says, my main two concerns about this $400 billion human trafficking industry is one, the propaganda of non-traditional paths to parenthood, and two, the ongoing crimes against humanity this industry commits, resulting in the loss of human lives on a mass scale. And he goes down to talk to about embryo adoption and surrogacy, because this is where Gladney, Bethany, these places are moving to because of the lack of newborns. Because the adoption industry, and we will, or the human trafficking industry in the United States is worth what? It's like 25 to 27 billion. The last number I saw was 25, but people are now saying it's up to $27 billion a year. So somewhere in between those two numbers. And money is exchanged for newborn infants. Then those newborn infants get a whole new piece of paper saying the adopted parents' names are on there instead of the people that actually are biologically related to them. A lot of people still don't even know this. So this is something, I'm like, we're talking about education. It's not our responsibility, which you're right. It's not our responsibility. But if they don't even understand that basis, I'm concerned of going from adoption to human trafficking with some people. It might be too big of a leap if they don't even know that we actually have receipts for ourselves, and our vital records are actually changed. We can't have access to our health records in look at that, 19, 17 states. Only 15 states allow us this. And then here's the book I was talking about, Conceiving Christian America by Reza Cromer. This woman spent years in the artificial reproduction technology field, and she has fully talked about how we were talking about Christianity. The Christian industrial complex has the language, again, like you were talking about, how they have weaved this language for years, the systemic saviorism language. And now we're literally doing just what you said in your post yesterday about they're expanding into surrogacy, embryo adoption, and eventually they'll create babies without a woman, right? That's where we're going, right? That's what you were talking about in the AI.
Yeah. Uh, there's so much to
There's
cover,
a
so
lot
much
there.
there's so much to unpack. Um, and I wanted to be mindful about how, in a way, we are taking the existing narrative and reconstructing it in this conversation. So I want to make sure that as we go through this process of reconstruction, shall we call it reconstructive surgery here, right?
Right.
Uh, that we're hitting the right notes and the right points. And so, just to recap before we launch into a whole new issue,
Yeah.
is that um, uh, the for myself, why I'm on here with you, uh, is to say the illusion of adoption is over. Uh, Please go read my article where
Yes.
I outline a process of deprogramming yourselves from this propaganda, and it's based on the the underlying foundation that this is a human trafficking industry that has created this, shall we say, modern day, but really it's over 400 years. So a book that I'd like to introduce to the conversation is Adoption: What You Should Know,
Okay.
um, which very effectively outlines the history of this industry. And what I have put out there as this is our go-to reference book that all of us who have been directly impacted by this industry should have on our shelves and our reading apps. Um, so, Adoption: What You Should Know
Adoption, what you should know. Put it out there. Yep.
uh, by Janine Vance. Mhm. And
The Vance twins.
from the Vance twins.
Hmm.
And so this is a 400-year-old uh, child supply market uh, under the guise of adoption. But it's really, and I'm going to drop this in at this point, it's really originating from uh, human slavery and child labor. So this is certainly not coming into uh, the ongoing conversations here in the
Hmm.
U.S. or potentially other places around the world. The fact that this industry started from human trafficking, human slavery, child labor,
Hmm.
and it was
Orphan trains, Georgia Tan. Yeah.
well, no. That's
You're
very
going further back.
so that is very U.S. centric.
Right. Yes.
And so, from my bird's eye view, from this big picture view, now, yeah, I'm going much further back.
Okay.
400, the U.S.
Yes.
isn't even 400
Oh,
years
yeah. No.
old. So,
Right.
so this is further back, but Janine covers the orphan trains, and
Hmm.
um, so in any case, just to put this out there, the origins of this modern day child supply market, which is how I've referenced it at this point, started with taking children from impoverished homes and families and putting them into labor camps in newly colonized territories. And they did this by way of telling their parents, uh, we're going to give them a better life. This is in the best interest of your child because they'll
Hmm.
receive better care and
Sure.
better education. Uh,
Hmm.
and instead, they were shipped over to labor camps where they were relabeled orphans,
Hmm.
never to see their families again.
Right.
This practice is still happening today.
Yes, it
And
does.
I'm gonna reference the Russia-Ukraine conflict, where this has been identified as a war crime. So, uh, yes, 400. So, so all this was meant to be a recap, not not to unpack this further. Um, Women are deserving a whole lot more of our attention, uh, and understanding that uh, you are being groomed from childhood at this
Hmm.
point, from an early age, because there is a pre-existing culture of coercion on a global scale, in which this industry has been able to operate freely, openly, and legally.
Hmm.
And it conflates the issues of child trafficking with child welfare and family planning. And this is where the conversations get muddied,
Hmm.
and why we uh, uh, um, through that lens look at other solutions, other family planning solutions such as guardianship and alternate care, as opposed to saying, "My gosh, this is a crime. This is human trafficking of women for their children, exploiting them for a profit." So to highlight your one of your latest points about receipts, I want to make sure that people understand wages are included in this uh, financial exchange, in this profiteering scheme. So, in this exploitation for profit, people are getting paid to process, quote,
Hmm.
adoptions,
Right.
right? So, this is addressing the argument people make, um, that well, there are um, there are adoptions that happen for free,
Hmm.
um, and and it's important to understand this is where it's systemic, it's structural, it's institutional, and it has required people at all levels of society, including our government, to legalize and subsidize this practice. And here, see, this crime,
Right.
it's not just a practice, right? So all throughout, it's hugely, incredibly important to keep your own language in check and watch how you minimize, just as I just did, just minimize uh, a- um, and rationalize what is really going on here. So understanding that, okay, this has been happening for over 400 years. This is multi-generational. This is how we've grown up. This is the world that we've been born into, right? Uh, there are layers of propaganda to unlearn
Hmm.
and to be deprogrammed. So this is, yeah, It's an incredibly huge task.
Yes, it is.
And many people opt to take the path of least resistance, when in fact, um, now I'm going to take this a step further before coming back to uh, the post you just read of mine. So,
Okay.
because part of our history that really does not come into our conversations, but need to, are the crimes against humanity. And we need to understand what defines a crime against humanity. You know,
Hmm.
even I haven't really, but one defining factor is uh, crimes that are committed on a large scale.
Right.
So we know, you know, in our history and even today, right, that continues on today, there is genocide of, particularly of indigenous people. There are unmarked mass graves of infants and children being excavated, being
Hmm.
exposed, unearthed all over the world.
Hmm.
The US, Canada, the UK, Ireland, right? Just to name a few. So uh, we have to acknowledge that, especially for ourselves, all that has happened to us in our population, what we are a part of, what we are all connected to, what connects all of us, is this history, this ongoing legacy of death and destruction. So when we bring it back to solutions for family planning, when we bring it back to human rights violations, when we bring it back to uh, where is this history, this ongoing living history? Why are we not bringing up, um, uh, you know, I think it's okay to say the worst of the worst that's happened to us.
Hmm.
And I put it out there to our people, to our population. Why are we not bringing up the worst of the worst? Uh, to me, it's because we have been socialized to embrace our traumas, to call ourselves adoptees,
Hmm.
to not upset our adoptive parents, right?
Right.
As you just indicated,
Right.
I don't want to speak badly of them. They're good people,
Right.
but
Yeah.
in this conversation,
Right.
what have they really done?
Right. And
You know,
that's the other thing you have to reconcile with too, as and a
it
person that was adopted.
it it's really tough to let go of that language, isn't it?
Right. I mean, you know, yeah, because if I were to just talk to, say, the groups that I talked to, and I came out and said, I was a trafficked person, they would probably instantly not want to hear me, even though the baby scoop era was a crime against humanity. My adoptive parents did participate in it, knowingly or not, which I do want to add in there because I don't think that they intentionally thought that they were doing something harmful. And this is where the conversation I like to get into is because the old saying is the road to hell was paved with good intentions, right? And that's very, very true. My parents were told, you just adopt if you can't have a child and everything will be fine. So to your point,
Propaganda.
right, that's the propaganda that has to stop. And we are not doing generations any kind of good, including the person that can't have a child, to just go adopt. All of us, including those of us
There,
that had this given, we are adopted, we are still responsible for our trauma. Even though it wasn't something that we did, we didn't deserve it, we're still responsible how we act in society. And that's where we get back
Well, I just want to double back to to just go do what?
to just go take a child. Right. And that's the
Yes.
point, right?
Yes.
Is we use the word adoption to make it palatable. And that's why I'm saying I'm with you. I have used the word trafficked, but it's like I also have to have people hear me so that I can pull them
Yeah.
into
I,
this is why I say that. This is why I say that. So it's like I have to
yeah.
weave a path to get them to hear me of why it's considered trafficking.
Okay. So this is a key thing here. Okay.
Yeah, we're having a good moment here.
Yeah, I'm like getting emotional. Uh, there are 2 points here. One we've already stated. It's not your job, it's not your responsibility to help them make that connection.
Right.
It's your job to tell them the truth of here's what has happened to you.
Mm-hmm.
But, but, uh, let's be a bit more forgiving. As you said, this is an industry,
Mm-hmm.
and yes, I will outline, how I arrived at a $400 billion industry,
Mm-hmm.
global industry,
Global. Yes.
um, how it's gotten away with coercing everybody
Mm-hmm.
into coercing, brainwashing everybody. So, yes, uh, I am understanding people should be given uh, a chance to um, uh, 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 know the truth.
Mm-hmm.
So, with that, uh, the definition that I work off of is the act or fact of legally taking someone else's child to raise as one's own, but really raise it as one's own. So I've pulled out the key words taken it own,
Okay.
taken it to own. So, uh, in this way, that's where I say I was taken from my homeland. I use the framework that indigenous people use who are removed from their lands.
Right.
So that is acknowledging this other layer that you're saying,
Right.
which is this is part of an ongoing colonization
Right.
that has gone on for hundreds of years, moving entire populations of people and having them assimilate to a more dominant
Right.
uh, population.
Right. Under the guise of we're colorblind.
And uh, so uh, it is important to acknowledge that we've all been had.
Mm-hmm.
We all
All of
need to
us.
we all need to come together. So uh, I'm losing my train of thought here,
There's a
but
lot of them.
there there really is so
Yeah.
much to cover here. So uh, where this is going, I know that I had numerous other points, but this is the organic nature of
Right.
having
Conversations.
having
Yeah.
these conversations. So maybe they'll come back, but to reference the $400 billion industry, the reason it's important, and all, the reason it's been important for me to reframe it as markets. I don't say industrial complex. by the way. It's an industry.
Hmm.
So use the least amount of words that really make it as accurate and precise as possible, right?
Hmm.
Let's not over explain, and use so many words to, because then people will start pulling it apart and, going off in just different directions. And,
Oh, yeah.
that's where misunderstanding and uh, um, misdirection happens. So, industry, uh, this industry has now created a number of different markets.
Hmm.
And whether it's created or just simply exploited other existing markets. So, so you named the adoption market.
Hmm.
Um, I say the child supply market.
Yep.
I have also put it out there. It's a child harvesting market.
Mm.
So, you know, I'm gonna put that out there. Referencing the baby boxes.
Yes.
This is a form of baby harvesting. And that's a whole other
That's another one.
thing that we can get into. But so child supply market seems a bit more industry based as opposed to
Hmm.
child harvesting
Right.
or baby harvesting, which makes it a bit, more criminal sounding.
Right. Right.
So again, depending on your orientation, but so child supply market, referring to the industry, um, and then we have the surrogacy market, and then we have the fertility markets.
Hmm.
There are multiple markets in there.
Right.
Uh, so when we combine all of these on top of the known criminal human trafficking market,
Right.
which, by the way, according to one organization, A21, says it's now a $236 billion human trafficking industry.
Wow.
Up from just 2 years ago, it was quoted at 150 billion. So up from 236 billion uh, is the latest number there.
And I think that that correlates to it was a few years ago, the World Health Organization said that 1 in 6 people worldwide would be affected by infertility, that it was a global crisis. And I mean, it goes to, I mean, what are we seeing Trump do now? He's wanting to give motherhood medals, paying people to have children. And it was $5,000. Now, $5,000. I'm just going to take the United States because he's the president of the United States. $5,000 wouldn't even cover the bills that the hospital is going to send you. And of course, the medal goes back to ties of Nazis and other things too. But it is definitely rooted in eugenics and quiverful beliefs because they're specifically wanting a specific colored skin person to have children. And that's why I went back to the baby scoop era because that was mainly white children too. The international, the it was a trend that went from basically baby scoop era to then it went to transracial and international adoptions after that. That was what I was alluding to the we don't see color when they adopted children of different color. And then you were talking about how they assimilated them into the white culture instead of embracing the culture that the child came from. And the colonization. I mean, it all lines up, everything that you're saying, because that's the root of what they're trying to do. Am I summarizing things of how we started to where we're coming back to the end here now?
Uh, um, the U.S. has an ongoing slavery issue that is seen for obvious reasons as a very black and white issue. Um, and it, it, it's important to note that the reason many US based advocates uh, uh, have pushed back against calling this human trafficking is because the US has defined human trafficking uh, as sexual exploitation and
Right.
forced labor.
Right.
Now, there have been cases where human trafficking has been identified in uh, adoption rings or adoption uh, uh, groups. Um, so there, I believe there was the politician in Arizona where there was a clear-cut uh, um, sex trafficking operation through adoption, right? But this is where adoption itself, the buying and selling of children, the buying and selling of people, because it's not just children, right?
Correct.
It's also their mothers and fathers and family members and so on and so forth as well. Human trafficking is generally defined as the buying and selling of people,
Correct.
which you've already covered. So yeah, I appreciate you bringing back your reference points, and in terms of where this is all going, which by the way, you know, uh, I leave politics out of my uh, ho- uh, uh, just out of my my conversations because um, uh, each year, and I believe it goes back to the Clinton administration that started the National Adoption Month,
Mm-hmm. Right.
which is really just a month-long promotion of the industry,
Correct.
right? Um, every year since, each president has made their own proclamation to kick off National Adoption
Oh, yeah.
Month. I have publicly uh, made a boycott against National Adoption Month. Uh, for me, this cuts across uh, any politicized debate because every politician out there, U.S. and across the world, has essentially endorsed this industry
That's right. They have.
as adoption. So I want to make that point that, uh, and I want to highlight, something you said before. Really, this just needs to stop.
Hmm.
And,
Right.
and
On
so,
both sides.
so here's, well, the child supply market needs to stop. This industry needs to stop.
Correct.
We need to join our efforts with the other anti-trafficking organizations and activists
Yes.
saying human trafficking needs to stop worldwide, everywhere. So we need to join our efforts. So uh, the point about there are multiple markets that feed this side of the human trafficking industry. Uh, so surrogacy alone, right? We identify there are multiple
Hmm.
markets here, right?
Right.
Surrogacy alone uh, is currently 22, I believe it's like $22.1 billion marketplace globally. By 2034, so within 9 years, within a decade, it's going to skyrocket to 201.8 billion.
Mm.
So combine that with the 236 billion that's already identified as the human trafficking industry, right? So, yeah, this is well over a $400 billion criminal industry,
And
right?
that's commodifying babies.
So this is important in terms of two other points that you brought up. Uh, I want to say the industry is making a clear shift away from everything that has to do with adoption. So this post that you mentioned, that I put up yesterday
Mhm.
is based on someone else's post, by the way. Uh, and we didn't really get into too much of that, you know, but they brought up a 2-year-old article from Business Insider about embryo adoptions
Mhm.
because now we have twins, who are born from frozen embryos.
Right.
And uh, so, and they're certainly putting the message out there of endorsing adoption, right?
Oh, yeah.
But this is a 2-year-old debate because embryo adoption has been overtaken by surrogacy and egg donation,
Yeah.
neither of which we don't say surrogacy adoption anymore, right?
Right.
Egg donation. Uh, so surrogacy and egg donation really don't use the adoption language at all. And to your point about there's the industry, in a way, has heard our grievances and said, okay, birth certificate issues, birth family, birth mother issues, surrogacy egg donation,
Mhm.
uh,
Yeah.
taken care of,
Mhm.
right?
And
Uh,
embryo adoption, and that's what they're still calling it, embryo adoption, because they're trying to use the Savorian language of adoption, is actually when you go to legally transfer the embryo, it's property law. It's under property law. So the embryo is a piece of property. And that
uh,
always really hits me when I read that, because there's been cases where people divorce and then their property, what are they going to do with it?
so, in terms of, and yeah, this probably should have come up earlier in our conversation,
Probably.
but I'm glad you brought this up. In order to transfer and transport human beings legally, they need to be commodified
Right.
because transferring and transporting human beings, again, for exploiting them for profit, is a crime of human trafficking. So this is the loophole. Well,
Mm-hmm.
it's not really a loophole, but it's what legislators and policymakers have created this space to commodify human lives for
Right.
adoption. That has legalized that process. So this question, when we call ourselves adoptees, uh, we need to see it through their lens, not ours. This is not, we get to call ourselves whatever we want because we're the ones with the lived experience. No, no, there is an underlying industry driven by policymakers and
Mm-hmm.
those who have legalized this. So we need to use their definition, which is we need to commodify you in order to transfer you from one place to another, from one set of people to another. Um, and So that's an important point that, yeah, should have probably should have been made, earlier. But I'm glad you brought this up.
Yeah.
In
Eh,
terms of what I've seen, embryo adoption has fallen by the wayside in favor of surrogacy and egg
right.
donation. So mm, in terms of the numbers, again, you quoted 5,000. No, well, surrogacy has actually been around for quite a while,
Hmm.
and there's ads out there,
Oh, yeah. I've seen
all,
billboards.
I mean, all over. They're not 5,000. They're 15, 20, 50, 80,000.
I saw a billboard that said be a surrogate for $60,000.
So,
And they
yeah,
target people in specific areas. They put these billboards up in specific areas, knowing that
absolutely.
someone can use $60,000.
Absolutely. Uh, so, as an industry, right? Again, this is not like an industrial complex. No, as an industry, it's just a clear-cut market shift and profit-making
Hmm.
exploitation, right?
Right.
So exploitation for profit. So um, it's no longer about race. It's no longer about. It's just simply
Hmm.
dollar signs.
Right. Yeah, now it is. And who has the money, and it is who can parent or not.
Uh, no. So none of that really matters. So this whole like home study process and vetting process, it's all part of this illusion. You have the money,
Hmm.
uh,
Right.
great. Give us the money, we'll give you a baby.
Right. We'll take
So,
it from someone that could have used the money to probably parent themselves.
so so that's where the conversations, debates break down in terms of this is not about family planning.
Hmm.
This is not about helping people become parents. This is simply about moving human
Hmm.
lives, um, uh, and collecting on human
Right.
lives. So, okay. I'm getting the sense that we're coming to the end here. This is
Yeah.
where it's all, for me, in this reconstruction of the narrative, as a way, in a way of crescendoing to where my work, my focus is these days. These two issues, right? These two areas of concern about the propaganda and about this industry is that on one hand, we have an industry that is continuing to expand
Mhm.
despite all of our efforts to reform, to abolish, no, because this is, hundreds of billions of dollars in this industry. So we need a global movement. We need um, allyship across multiple populations. Everyone needs to um, get involved in this because surrogacy and egg donation today is really just here to work out the ethical dilemmas that we've brought up. Uh, and it's a go-between, really, to the next big innovation in uh, assisted reproductive technologies, which is lab grown babies.
Hmm.
And with the outpouring support of AI, uh, we're going to see AI assisted reproductive technologies.
So,
And so my big to do about this is, where is humanity going? Are we evolving our sense of science and technology, medical breakthroughs? Are we um, putting all that towards essentially eliminating humanity out of humankind.
Hmm.
So that is where one major concern is. The other is to tie in the fact that there's ongoing genocides by way of uh, this child supply market, this industry, taking and trafficking and torturing children to death. And I have um, been told we now have over 230 cases in our database. And I'm speaking for the Society for Adoption Truth,
Mm-hmm.
which, by the way, will go under a rebranding. But there is a group of us that have focused on these murder cases of children in the child welfare system and these private child supply markets. And I'm putting the word out that uh, this is taking, trafficking, and now torturing children to death. And this isn't just abuse, right? People send me, number of cases where children are being abused, and uh, I found a way, how to help raise awareness about that. But that is an entirely separate category, legally and otherwise, from torture and murder.
Right.
And so I'm aware of and now supporting a handful of families, uh, and I'll uh, say their names: Kathy Tukanian, Felicia Chandler, um, uh, uh, what's Jalen's mom. Uh, so there's Jalen Anderton, her mom. Um, as well as the other children whose mothers I'm forgetting their names, but there's Moira Foster uh, and Orrin and Orson West. But I want to make sure people know who these people are, who these children and their families are. So
Thank you.
uh, we know we know about Trenton Schuler and Moira Foster as Blake and London Devon, uh, and they have an active case on trial, going to trial and investigation in North Carolina right now.
Thank you for keeping track
Uh,
of all those names.
and there's as well, I just mentioned Jalen Anderton, um, and there's also I mentioned Orson and Orrin West, who go by whose birth names are Sincere and Classic Pettis, and their bodies are still missing. So their families still uh, looking to get closure, um, while the people who have been accused and charged with murdering them are sitting in jail, tight-lipped. Um, so, uh, in any case, this is where I want to land with. This is what my focus is, um, and probably will be going forward for well into the future. Uh, this industry needs to be shut down. There are multiple crimes being committed, and not just here in the U.S., but
Right.
across the world.
Right.
Um, Crimes need to be stopped. We fight crimes to stop crimes, not to reform, not to fix.
Right.
They need to be stopped. And certainly, uh, families need every chance, every opportunity to be given to stay together, to be successful together.
Yes, they
Uh,
do.
so, with that, I'll make that my my last thing.
Thank you, Moses. And thank you for talking to me today. Your message needs to be heard, and I wanted to help give a platform for that. And thank you so much. I'm going to make sure and put all the links, the book you mentioned, and everything in the content so that others can look everything up, your article. We'll have all of that so people can easily reference it and do some of their own education, right?
Right.
Thank you.